She waited until the cameras stopped rolling, until the applause faded and the stage lights dimmed. Then, at 90 years old, with a wry grin that said she already knew the headlines this would spark, Loretta Lynn hit record on a dusty cassette deck and cleared her throat. "I've forgiven plenty," she began, her voice still sharp enough to cut glass. "But there's a few I never could stomach." 7 names followed. No explanations, no apologies.
I have so many memories of Conway. Conway is one of the greatest singers I ever heard.
Just a slow, deliberate pause after each one, like she was hammering nails into a coffin the world hadn't seen yet. Think about it. The coal miner's daughter, who sang every secret from birth control to barroom betrayal before Nashville dared whisper them, had kept this secret longer than any hit she ever wrote. Why? What made these artists, some legends, some newcomers, so unforgivable in the eyes of a woman famous for telling it exactly like it is? And why choose now, at the very end, to finally let the list escape the vault? Maybe it was age loosening her guard. Maybe it was one last warning shot at a music industry she believed was trading truth for polish. Or maybe, just maybe, Loretta wanted the final word in a feud nobody else even knew was still burning.
Saying do la la la.
Yeah.
You know, who's going to remember that stuff?
Right.
Not me or you.
No.
You're going to remember don't come home with drinking and loving on you.
Because while the world cradled her legacy in gentle nostalgia, she was still keeping score. Coal dust under her fingernails, grudges etched like verses in a bitter ballad. She clicked off the recorder, slipped the tape into an envelope marked "Printed if you dare," and handed it to her oldest friend. The instructions were simple. Wait until I'm gone, then let the world listen. And when that envelope finally opened, the names inside didn't just rewrite country music gossip. They forced fans to question everything they thought they knew about their beloved queen of honesty. So, who made Loretta's blacklist? And what did they do to land there? Keep watching, because the first name on that tape belonged to the one woman Nashville swore was her sister in song, until Loretta made sure the whole world understood otherwise. Loretta Lynn liked to say the fiercest fights in Nashville were never shouted across a stage. They were whispered between dressing room mirrors, where sequins glinted like knives and every polite smile hid a bruise. Tammy Wynette was that bruise. To the public, they were twin queens in rhinestone crowns, but on Loretta's private scorecard, Tammy's name was circled in red ink from the moment "Stand By Your Man" rocketed up the charts. Loretta heard the song and bristled. Why should any woman stand by a cheating fool when she could knock him flat and sing about it later? She had clawed her way out of Butcher Holler with borrowed boots and a guitar that still smelled of coal dust. Tammy, all porcelain poise and studio gloss, felt like the industry's prettiest promise that grit was optional if you looked fragile enough. Producers, sensing fireworks, hounded them to cut a duet. Loretta shot back, "Oil and water don't harmonize." Off camera, they traded compliments as stiff as starched lace, then rushed to separate corners of the Opry hallway to vent. The tension peaked at the 1974 CMAs, when a stage manager mistakenly assigned them the same dressing room. Legend says Loretta arrived first, saw Tammy's gowns hanging where her fringe jacket should be, and growled, "I sing truth, not tear-room tragedy." Tammy, ever soft-spoken, answered with a single cool glance that froze the room harder than the air conditioning. Word of the standoff rippled through backstage like wildfire, yet both women stepped on stage moments later and beamed at an audience that never sensed a thing. But Loretta did not forget. Every time a radio host praised Tammy's angelic vulnerability, Loretta muttered that angels never crawled through Kentucky mud. She refused to rehearse on bills where Tammy's set ran longer, refused offers to tour as country's dynamic duo, and when asked if they were friends, replied, "We're cordial, honey. That's different." By the time she hit 90 and pressed record on that final cassette, Tammy's name was still the first to roll off her tongue, a reminder that Loretta's memory was as sharp as the elbow she kept ready for anyone who tried to polish the dirt off country music. If Tammy tested Loretta's patience, Conway Twitty tested her very definition of partnership. On vinyl, they sounded like sin wrapped in velvet. Louisiana Woman, Mississippi Man burned up the charts because their voices tangled like lovers in the dark. But Loretta always noticed the liner notes, his name first, hers second, as though she were seasoning on his steak instead of the iron skillet itself. Conway was slick, pompadoured, and headline-hungry. Reporters called him the genius behind the duo, then asked Loretta what it felt like to play his foil. She smiled for the cameras and seethed in the wings. The chemistry was real, sure, but so were the slights. Conway rewrote set lists without warning, trimming her verses to squeeze in an extra guitar solo. He scheduled solo interviews during their press days, spinning stories about guiding Loretta's sound as if her honky-tonk grit needed a male compass. Backstage, she ribbed him. "Careful, darlin', your ego's showing." But the joke curdled after Atlanta '79. A teen reporter asked how it felt to duet with a woman past her prime. Conway chuckled. "She's still got it, for her age." Loretta heard every syllable. That night, her intro came and went, but she stayed behind the curtain, forcing Conway to vamp alone while 10,000 fans stared. He never forgot the humiliation. She never once apologized. Their personal lives tangled too. Rumors swirled about a tour bus romance. Loretta laughed them off. Her husband, Doolittle, did not. He skipped shows, phoned road managers at 3 a.m., and warned Conway to keep his hands where the spotlight could see them. Did anything happen? Loretta never said, but she did confess years later that Conway's attention made her feel like a prize he wanted to hang on the wall, not a partner he wanted to build a mansion with. By the time she pressed record on that farewell tape, Conway had been gone a quarter century, yet the sting still pulsed. She named him second, voice flat as a judge's gavel. No bitterness, just a verdict. Some debts stay unpaid even after the debtor is in the ground. And as the cassette wheels turned, Loretta leaned closer to the mic, ready to call out the next thief of country music's soul. The third name on Loretta's list didn't rise out of red dirt or rattle in a honky-tonk doorway. It drifted in on a wave of soft-focus lighting, perfect teeth, and crossover dreams. Olivia Newton-John looked like Nashville's new favorite fantasy in 1974. Feathered hair, pastel album covers, and a voice so smooth it never snagged on heartbreak. When the CMAs handed the fresh-faced Australian Female Vocalist of the Year, Loretta's stomach flipped. She'd still been wiping coal dust from Coal Miner's Daughter tour merch. Olivia glided onto the stage as if country music were a themed costume party. Backstage, executives buzzed about modernizing the genre. Loretta heard a different pitch. Polish over pain, she'd clawed up riverbanks to make her first radio spot. Olivia's debut came with orchestral strings and primetime television specials. One label head told the press that Olivia would soften the rough edges of country for suburban audiences. Loretta spat her coffee. Rough edges, she believed, were where the truth lived. The rift widened when a magazine cover hailed Olivia as the future of country. Loretta tore the page out, folded it into a tiny square, and kept it in her purse like a splinter she refused to let heal. She skipped the next CMA gala, officially citing scheduling conflicts, unofficially muttering, "I won't clap for a pop star playing cowboy." Word traveled fast. Radio DJs joked that Olivia could sell out stadiums but couldn't win over the queen of authenticity. Things might have cooled if Olivia hadn't given a bubbly interview on British television, promising to help bring country into the mainstream. Loretta replayed the clip 3 times, each spin turning her amusement to fury. Help? Country music didn't need rescuing, it needed remembering. That night, on her tour bus, she scrawled a single line in her notebook. "When Gloss walks in, grit must growl louder." Decades later, recording her farewell tape, she growled one more time, speaking Olivia's name with the flat weight of a gavel, before leaning into the mic to summon a betrayal that cut even closer to home. Blood, Loretta liked to joke, is thicker than whiskey, but it stains just the same. And nothing proved that truth harder than her own baby sister. Crystal Gayle glided into country radio like a sigh. Waist-length hair, gowns that caught the spotlight like silk waterfalls, A voice so satin smooth, Nashville barely noticed there was coal dust underneath the family name. To fans, it looked like a fairy tale torch passing. To Loretta, it felt like déjà vu without the bruises. She'd hauled guitars through barrooms that reeked of spilled beer and cheap apologies. Crystal debuted under chandeliers, escorted by publicists who spoke in market demographics. The first time "Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue" hit #1, Loretta applauded from her tour bus, then muttered to a bandmate that some singers seemed to get a silver microphone where she got a bus ticket paid in promises. But admiration curdled fast. Magazine spreads labeled Crystal the fresh face of country, a phrase that aged Loretta in print faster than cigarettes ever could. Still, Loretta swallowed her pride. Family, after all, was the one thing she'd fought to keep intact. Then came her 60th birthday tribute, an all-star Opry blowout film for television where every living legend showed up except the sister whose calendar suddenly couldn't budge. Loretta smiled for the cameras, but backstage she paced, boots thudding like a heart that refused to forget. Months later, a joint talk show booking offered a chance to mend fences. On air, the host asked Crystal what Loretta meant to her career. One pause, one polite smile, one cool word. Influential. Nothing more. Not a story about childhood bunk beds. Not a thank you for doors Loretta had kicked open. Viewers saw sisterly decorum. Loretta felt a glacier forming beneath studio lights. When the taping wrapped, she hugged producers, skipped Crystal, and walked straight to the parking lot without looking back. Years later, into that final cassette, she spoke her sister's name third, voice steady, breath even, proving that forgiveness might be divine, but forgetting was never in the Lynn bloodline. Merle Haggard swaggered into Loretta's life like a kindred outlaw, scarred knuckles, nicotine grin, and songs that rang honest as church bells at dawn. They traded war stories over lukewarm coffee, toasted survival with shots that could corrode chrome, and for a moment she believed she'd found a brother who understood how heavy a guitar felt when it was the only thing keeping the lights on. Then one muggy afternoon in '82, Merle cracked a joke on live radio that felt like a backhand to every woman who ever clawed her way onto a jukebox. Loretta's been milking that poor coal girl act too long. Coal dust and babies, what else she got? The studio laughed. Loretta heard the laugh echo for years. She'd planned a duet, raw, redemptive, a hymn for folks drowning in the same bottle Merle and her daddy once fought, but he brushed it off as church lady stuff, claiming audiences wanted fireworks, not confessions. That one shrug rewrote their history. To her, songs were stitched from scars. To him, scars had become just another stage prop. On the tour bus that night, she scribbled a line in her journal. When truth turns into theater, the curtain's already on fire. For months, she kept her fury silent, letting it simmer like coffee gone bitter, until a festival in Tulsa where Merle sauntered past, winked, and, without stopping, asked if she'd opened for him yet. Loretta didn't answer. She stepped on stage moments later and ripped through "You Ain't Woman Enough" like it was a verdict, pausing just long enough to stare him down across the footlights. The crowd screamed. Merle tipped his hat, but the message was clear. She'd never again let him write her narrative. Decades later, recording that final cassette, his name rolled out fifth. Steady, unemotional. A ledger entry marked betrayal with interest. And as the tape whirred, she readied the next count. Younger, glossier, a cyclone in sequins that threatened to erase everything Loretta had built before the applause even died. Reba McEntire. Reba McEntire hit Nashville like a neon comet. Arena spotlights, choreographed pyrotechnics, and a marketing machine humming so loud even the Grand Ole Opry floorboards vibrated. Loretta watched it from the sidewings, boots scuffed, remembering honky-tonk nights where feedback was the only laser show. Now, glossy tour buses, wrapped in Reba's flame-red smile, rolled past her own rig like bright billboards announcing the future. Country magazines crowned Reba the new queen before Loretta's latest album had shipped. And one journalist declared, with the certainty of someone who'd never inhaled coal dust, that Reba was what happens when country finally grows up. Loretta tucked that line into her notebook and underlined it twice. The real fracture split open during an awards telecast. Reba strode out in head-to-toe sequins and belted Loretta's signature heartbreak anthem, every note perfect, every camera angle adoring, yet not a syllable of acknowledgement for the woman who'd written those wounds into existence. Loretta sat front row, spine straight, clapping politely while her pulse hammered like a snare drum. Backstage, she felt the chill when Reba breezed past, perfume trailing, not even a nod. That silence stung more than any critic because it prophesied an industry ready to swap lived in scars for studio sheen. Loretta told a confidant later that night she just watched the dress rehearsal for country's funeral, and if the genre didn't remember its dirt road roots, it would soon be selling nostalgia by the yard like Rhinestone Friend. She refused press requests to comment, no praise, no shade, just a locked jaw and eyes that said the conversation was over before it began. On her farewell cassette, she spoke Reba's name sixth, voice steady as a church bell before dawn, then added a single whispered sentence the mic barely caught. They'll call polished progress till the shine blinds them. The wheels of the tape hissed on, ready for the last name. Proof that even legends can be haunted by ghosts clad in black. That ghost, of course, wore black and carried a guitar that could rattle prayer halls. Johnny Cash. He and Loretta once swapped survival stories like secret passwords, poverty, addiction, faith hanging by a frayed string. But friendships built on bruises can split in the wrong light. In 1977, a network planned a televised gospel special with Cash hosting and Loretta slated as the centerpiece hymn. She arrived early, nailed every harmony, and felt the coal dust certainty that truth was finally being honored. The next morning, her manager got the call. She was cut. Whispers drifted back weeks later. Johnny had asked the switch, fearing Loretta's politics might puncture the show's polished piety. The news hit harder than any tabloid jab. Cash had always praised her honesty. Now it was apparently too sharp for prime time. Loretta never confronted him. She folded the hurt into her stage smile and wrote one journal line. When a brother fears your truth, he'll trade it for applause. Months passed. Then a letter in Cash's slanted hand. Pages of apology. She read it once, refolded it, and slipped it into a cedar box beside her wedding band and a lock of her mother's hair. Forgiveness might be holy. Forgetting was optional. They shared stages again, but conversation stayed shallow, as if both feared the floor might crack under the weight of that unspoken night. Years later, with the cassette whirring in her farmhouse kitchen, Loretta spoke his name seventh. No anger, just the tired respect you give a ghost that still shows up uninvited. She ended with a murmur only tape could catch. He knew better. The list was complete. 7 nails tapped into a coffin she'd kept shut for half a century, ready to rattle Nashville one last time. Loretta Lynn's last tape isn't a spiteful roll call. It's a map of the scars she earned defending country music's dirt road soul. Each name she spoke was a boundary line, drawn where gloss tried to smother grit, where profit tried to muzzle truth, where even friends forgot the cost of honesty. She could forgive hardship. She'd survived plenty. But betrayal of the music itself? Never. And that refusal, sharper than any rhinestone, is why her songs still feel warm in the hand. They were never polished for comfort. They were forged to keep the fire burning. So now the envelope is open and the nails are counted. What do we do with them? Maybe we recognize that grudges, like old guitars, can sound sour or righteous depending on who's playing. Maybe we ask whether country's future still has room for coal dust under the fingernails, or if polish has already won. And maybe, just maybe, we listen to Loretta's warning, don't trade pain for perfume, because the perfume always fades, but the pain makes the chorus stick. Tell us which rivalry struck you hardest, and whether Loretta was right to guard her truth with iron nails. Drop your thoughts below. Hit that follow if you want more untold backstories. And remember, A real country song never apologizes for the mud on its boots.